Within every human soul lies a force that refuses to be diminished, an indomitable will that is not satisfied with the comfort of the surface. It is this force that drives us to go beyond the known, to confront limits, to descend into the very abyss in search of something we do not always know how to name. Jung recognized this energy as the archetype of the hero, and its presence marks a turning point in the journey of individuation. The hero represents the internal drive for overcoming, for facing chaos, for confronting oneself. He is the nascent consciousness that refuses to live imprisoned by the automatic. It is the part of us that, in the face of pain or disorder, does not flee. On the contrary, it advances. In myths, the hero faces monsters, crosses deserts, loses everything only to then discover his true power. These images are not mere allegories. They are symbolic portraits of a deep psychic process. The dragon that the hero faces represents the unintegrated unconscious forces, fears, traumas, repressed desires. The desert represents existential emptiness, the silence after the deconstruction of the persona and the confrontation with the shadow. Loss, fall, humiliation are stages in the dissolution of the inflated ego, prerequisites for the birth of a new consciousness. But the hero is not driven by pride, he is driven by necessity. Something calls him, and this call cannot be ignored. It may come as a crisis, an illness, a rupture, a persistent dream, a deep feeling that life as it is cannot continue. The call is always symbolic and always radical. Something in you needs to die for the essential to be born. This process of confrontation requires courage, yes, but not the superficial courage of those who consider themselves invincible. The courage of the hero is that of one who recognizes their own fear and, nonetheless, proceeds. He knows that the path is not safe, that the territory is dark, that there will be losses, but he also knows, instinctively, that the only real alternative is to continue sleeping, and he refuses to do so. In symbolic terms, the hero is the mediator between the ego and the self. He represents the movement of consciousness that turns inward, confronts the unconscious powers, undergoes trials, and returns transformed. It is no coincidence that, in many cultures, the hero dies before being reborn. This symbolic death is inevitable, because the old ego must crumble for a new inner structure to emerge, broader, truer, more connected to the center. But the hero does not walk alone. He needs symbols, guidance, psychic nourishment, and this is where one of the deepest and most ambiguous presences of the unconscious comes in: the Great Mother. Before time, before name, even before consciousness, there was the womb, the undifferentiated totality of existence. The archetype of the Great Mother represents this primordial origin. She is the matrix of the psyche, the symbolic womb from which all things emerge, and to which, inevitably, everything returns. In her luminous dimension, she nurtures, protects, envelops, and generates life. In her dark face, she suffocates, devours, paralyzes. Like all archetypal images, she is ambivalent. And it is precisely this ambivalence that gives her depth. In the journey of individuation, after the confrontation with chaos and the struggle of the hero, the individual is led back to the origin. But this return is not a regression. It is a reintegration. The reunion with the Great Mother symbolizes the recognition of the deepest unconscious forces, the instinct of belonging, the need for acceptance, the search for rooted meaning. She appears in dreams as the earth, the ocean, the cave, the immense woman, the goddess, the ancestor. She is the energy that sustains us and threatens us, that heals us and imprisons us, depending on how we relate to her. Throughout history, diverse cultures have represented this figure with different names: Isis, Gaia, Demeter, Mary, Kali. But all these images share the same symbolic essence, the principle of fertility, protection, death, and rebirth. Contact with the inner Great Mother confronts us with the fundamental paradox of life. Only those who accept dying can be reborn. And at this point in the journey, something dissolves. The heroic ego, which until then fought for itself, finds itself before the force that transcends the self. The individual bows before the cosmic. And then, in the silence of this encounter, something new is born. This new does not come from force, nor from control, nor from will. It comes as a breath, a fragile glow, a spark. This new is the divine child. The divine child is one of the richest and most enigmatic archetypes of the collective unconscious. It symbolizes latent potential, becoming the center that has not yet fully realized itself. It is the possibility of regeneration, the sacred future inscribed within the present. In dreams, it appears as a radiant baby, a wise child, an innocent figure, yet endowed with hidden power. It is not just a symbol of literal childhood, but of the psychic capacity to renew, to start over, to be born from oneself after traversing the inner desert. Jung saw in the divine child a direct representation of the self. Not the self as an achieved totality, but as a promise, as an archetypal guidance that leads the psyche toward integration. When this child appears, it does not come as a rational answer. It comes as presence, as a living symbol of what is still possible, even after chaos. It is the healing that does not explain, but transforms. It is the center that resurfaces at the exact moment when everything seemed lost. But, like everything in the symbolic universe, the child also needs to be recognized and cared for. It is not about idolizing it or protecting it in an infantilized way. It is about honoring its meaning, understanding that it represents the psychic future, the most authentic and vulnerable part of being, and that, without it, the journey of individuation stagnates. Without it, the cycle does not complete. By uniting the energy of the Great Mother with the presence of the divine child, something essential happens. The being returns to its origin, not as escape, but as transformation. The psyche reorganizes, consciousness expands, and it is at this point, in this fertile field where death and birth intertwine, that the most central figure of all of Jung's psychology begins to emerge: the self. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's core ideas and gives you tools to understand yourself more deeply. Link is in the pinned comment. Everything you have experienced so far, the masks you had to wear, the shadows you faced, the opposites you reconciled, the battles you fought, and the rebirths you underwent, all of this pointed to a center, not a fixed point in space, but an internal, deep, silent, and living presence. Carl Jung called this center the self, and it is here that the archetypal journey finds its symbolic apex. The self is not the inflated ego, much less an idealized image of who you would like to be. It is, in Jungian terms, the archetype of psychic wholeness. It represents the union of opposites, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, reason and instinct. It is what you have always been, but have not yet become. The self is the timeless essence of being, the organizing core that guides the process of individuation from the beginning. While the ego operates in the external world, seeking control, identity, and security, the self acts as an inner compass, guiding the psyche toward integration. It manifests in symbols, myths, dreams, never directly, as its nature transcends rational language. In dreams, it may appear as a divine figure, an old wise man, a golden child, a mandala, a sacred animal, a luminous center. These are images charged with numinosity, which do not explain, but transform. It is important to understand that the self is not a moral or psychological ideal. It is not an improved version of yourself. It is an experience, an intimate experience of unity, in which all the conflicting parts of the psyche harmonize in a broader field. Integrating the self means becoming whole, not perfect, and for that, one must truly accept who they are, with all their imperfections, contradictions, and scars. The encounter with the self, however, is not a destination achievable by willpower. It is an archetypal gift that only reveals itself when the individual is ready. And this preparation is not linear. It requires destruction and reconstruction. It demands loss, silence, surrender. Because the self can only emerge when the ego yields, not as submission, but as conscious surrender to the greater wholeness that inhabits us. This moment of surrender is often accompanied by powerful symbols: the circle, the center, the cross, the temple, the light at the end of the cave, the alchemical union of opposites. All point to the same reality, the existence of a deep and living order that sustains the psyche. An order that does not come from outside, but from within, and that, when recognized, heals, not in the sense of eliminating suffering, but in the sense of giving it a place, a meaning, a function. Jung dedicated his entire work to understanding this process, and he always returned to the same point. The goal of life is not to be happy, but to become who you are. This means accepting the totality of being and allowing the self, as the organizing center of the soul, to guide us with its silent wisdom. The symbolic journey you have undertaken here is, in fact, a return to yourself. Jung did not promise simple solutions. He knew that diving into the collective unconscious is like descending to the bottom of a dark lake. There are risks, there are resistances, there are parts that will try to pull you back to the surface. But there are also treasures. And these treasures are not things you can carry in your pockets. They are subtle, silent, profound transformations. They are different gestures, broader perceptions, more authentic decisions. Most people live an entire life orbiting around a manufactured identity, a functional yet empty persona. And many only realize this when it is too late. When the body falls ill, when relationships collapse, when the soul disconnects from its own meaning. You now hold a symbolic map in your hands, and with it comes a responsibility, not to let yourself fall asleep again. These images were not invented, they were discovered. They are in the oldest myths of humanity. They are in tales, in dreams, in visions. They are within you. And perhaps now you will begin to notice them more clearly, in the way you react, in what you project onto others, in the patterns that repeat, in the emotions that arise from nowhere. Every gesture can be a symbolic message, every crisis, an invitation to integration. If something touched you in this video, if any image resonated, if any passage echoed something you have lived or are living now, share it in the comments. Which of these archetypes do you feel is most active in your life today? Which one do you have difficulty recognizing or integrating? This space here is also a symbolic field, a place of exchange, of expression, of meeting with the other. And don't forget, the next video is also part of this journey. It is important, because the symbolic process is continuous. Each new image, each new symbol, each new reflection expands your consciousness and brings you even closer to your truest essence. Keep walking, keep observing, keep listening to yourself. The inner journey is just beginning.